Hey everybody, this is Kyle with Simulation Lab here in Brooklyn, New York, and it's Friday night, and I'm having a couple spiked seltzers. I just got into these things because my girlfriend drinks them and they're really tasty. We're here with another tutorial using 3D Studio Max and TyFlow. We're going to be creating a sort of ASMR slime grabbing video thing. I don't know, I just made this hand squish video. Check it out. So the hand digs into this sphere of grain particles that act sort of like a viscous fluid because the particles themselves are bound together and then the binds break and it makes this sort of sticky looking grain substance. It's kind of satisfying, I guess. So I'm going to teach you guys how to do this. It's very simple, but there's a few caveats and a few tricks that I had to do to make the grains stick to the hand. So we're going to look into that. So we'll start off here in Max, and usually I start with a fresh blank Max scene, but this time in order to speed up the video a little bit so it's not 2 hours long, I already have the modeled hand and it's already rigged. Turn on the bone object so you can see them. And basically, this is the same hand movements that I used in the previous video that I made. Basically, the hand comes down, it gives it a little squeezy squeeze, and then it carries up something in the palm, right? And then you can tell there's a box that I modeled in here. The box is called Palm Attractor. And that's going to be helpful for later on once we get into the TyFlow object and we start adding um, some particular operators. So now we have this set up, and I guess as a preface, I did purchase this model. I think it was like $4 or $5 or whatever on TurboSquid or CG Trader or something. So you guys can easily pick up a hand model, and then rigging a hand is very simple to do. So you guys can do that, and if you have any rigging experience, it'll take you 5 minutes. It's really pretty easy. So hand comes down, grabs some objects, and then pulls away. I'm going to hide the bone objects for now, and you guys can do that in the display panel here. So anyway, so we're going to start back at 0. Um, I think my units are set to millimeters, and then 1 unit equals 1 centimeter. I don't know. It doesn't really matter for this one. Um, okay, so anyway, I think what we want to do first is set up this sphere itself. So we'll make it something like that, kind of just eyeball it. That'll work. And then I'm going to bring it up a little bit. Maybe that's too big. Scale that down a little bit here. If you want to do it the same as the example video, we could do that. Actually, you know what? Maybe we could do something else. Instead of a sphere, let's do a cube, a box. I'll do 25 to 25 to 25. Yeah, whatever. That should be cool. That'll be a whole lot of stuff for it to pick up. So that should be kind of cool. Maybe make it a little smaller, just, yeah. So right click, object properties. It says this object is not renderable, and then we're going to display it as a box. Just so we can see through it and we can see the little sprite voxels appear when we generate those in the TyFlow object. Which leads us to our next step. Create a TyFlow object here. object properties, and then put this off to the side so you can see what's happening here. And then drag this open a little bit. Okay, birth voxels. Man, that stuff is good. I think for now we'll stick with something like 10 millimeters. Pick the source object, which is going to be our cube, and we're going to display sprites. So there you go. Now if we scrub, nothing happens yet because we don't have anything set up with a collision or anything else. So what we're going to do first is we'll do the particle bind. And we'll leave the yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll do it breakable, do 100% breakable. And let's have it be 10% stretchy, and we'll compress it by 25%. We'll just kind of see how that works for now. Okay. And then we'll do particle physics. And we'll leave these settings at default for now. First thing that we want to do is we want to put the particles to sleep. So we're going to put a particle switch here first, and then we're going to go ahead and put particles to sleep first. So when they're birthed, they will be sleeping, and then once we interact with the particles, then they'll awaken. Simple enough. So we got our hand here, and then what we want to do is maybe, yeah, we do want to add a force, gravity force here, and we'll set this to like something like 0.5 or something, negative 0.5. We'll set the gravity to something like negative 0.2. Well, we can play with these settings later. But real quick, what we do want to do first is create a collision plane before we add our collision object. Oops, jeez. Should lay off the spike seltzers. Go to object properties. This one's not renderable because we'll put a backdrop plane in there later. When we go to render this thing, you can render it with any kind of background you want, but for this part of the simulation, this plane will just be not renderable, and then we'll go ahead and display that as box 2 so it's not in the way. Okay, bring back our TyFlow object here. And then let's set up a collision. Pick our colliders, which are be the plane that we just generated. Going to be the plane and the hand. So we have the plane and the hand as part of the collision objects. And we'll keep the absolute radius, collision radius set to 0. And maybe we'll set the friction a little bit higher and drop down the variation to 0. I think I did 15 last time, so we'll go with 15 for the friction variation. Okay, now that we have that set up, we'll see how this works. Okay. That's looking good. We'll expand this all the way out so we can see what's actually happening here. So the hand comes down and it busts through the cube. It grabs a handful, flips it up, and you can see that not much really sticks. We got a few stickers, got a few things stick into the hand. There's not much happening though. There's not much like actually being stuck to the sphere, to the hand, I mean. So what we want to have happen is when the hand comes down and grabs some of the voxels, we want some of them to stick to the hand when he flips it over. And so it looks like so it looks like the hand has a handful of the voxels, right? Kind of grabs a piece out of the whole pi, right? So that's why we set up this little collision box here, this little box, and all this box is very simple. Um, I just made it a basic box, and then I stuck it to the hand. And all I did here was I used this little select and link, and linked the box to this palm bone object. So go ahead and hide bones again. So that box comes in handy. We'll go ahead and make this a displays box again. So what we're going to do is set up a collision test. Well, a surface test. So we'll go surface test and we'll select our box, add selected, the palm attractor, and then what do we want to have happen once the palm passes through the voxels is we want to find the target. And the target will be the little box at the palm of the hand. So we'll go find target, connect that up. So this is not caching. We'll just zero the buffer out. And then target objects will be the palm. And then we're going to have to play with the velocity and the acceleration a little bit, I think. So I'll go with like 50 and then maybe 10 for the acceleration. And we'll keep everything else the way it is for now. I'll set this to sprites. And then I think what we're going to do is maybe we'll copy down this particle physics operator. And we'll copy and paste the collision object. And we'll see what that does for us. This might not look so good, but we'll see. Oh boy. Oh, now it's grabbing all of them. So maybe not exactly what we want, unless you want to have like a handful of the entire thing. Actually, it looks kind of cool. But maybe we'll drop down our find target acceleration a little bit. Maybe we'll do something like, let's see what this works at 5. Kind of just play with these values a little bit to get something that works for you. And that's kind of cool. That'll work. And then this does this acceleration and velocity does change when you have more voxels. So let's increase this to 6 millimeters or something. There we go. So now I got like much more dense voxelization happening, and you can tell when we get in proximity of that surface. Which, you know, what we could probably do is could probably set this. You know, instead of distance, maybe we could do a volume inside. Let's try that. So if it's inside, there you go. Then you only see a few of them. There we go. That'll work. Actually, it looks pretty good. Maybe if you want like a little bit more, we can increase the find target acceleration a little bit, maybe like to 7 or something. Yeah. So it reaches down, busts through it, and then grabs a handful. There you go. So just so you guys can see what's happening. Bust through it. And we can enable clustering on the particle bind, which I didn't do, but it actually is making clusters. Actually, did I do that? Let me see. Particle bind. I think that's if you do enable clustering. I'm not sure if that'll really affect it all that much, but you can control the clustering a little, have a little bit more fine-tuned control of how once the voxels are broken apart, they make these bigger chunks like that stay together, so it's not all completely smashed. So he grabs a handful of them and pulls it out. So that's effectively what I had in the original sample video here. It's very close. All right, so that's basically it for the sim. One thing left to do is add our mesh operators. And then we're going to want to do uncheck render only on both of these. And we're basically done with our TyFlow object. So we can close that out. And then if you want to render this, you go ahead and under TyFlow, go to TyMesher, put a TyMesher in your scene there, and then set this to blob mesh. That's cool. And then we'll pick our TyFlow object, and that's going to make a solid blob. So if we actually run that, that's what it looks like. Ooh, nice and gooey. So we don't really want that, so we're going to have to adjust some of these settings. So we'll do absolute radius, something like 4. You know what we can do is open up our TyFlow object again, and we'll disable these sprites. And maybe we'll set the voxel size to something like 0.5. There we go. So obviously the lower you set the voxel size and the radius, you're going to have to play with these values a little bit. Maybe to do something like 3. Yeah, there you go. So that gives us like a solid grain pattern. And then of course you can continue playing with this if you want to get it like something that's a little bit more manageable. And another thing we can do, instead of running the mesher on a live cached TyFlow object, so this you could tell is like very slow. It has to build like almost every frame. It's kind of arduous here. We'll go ahead and remove this. And what we'll do is we'll pop open our TyFlow object again, and we'll go to export particles. We'll just drag and put this on our canvas. Make sure this is set to TyCache and the entire timeline. And then we'll go ahead and set our output path. Sorry, I'm moving a little faster. Under TyCache settings, output, we'll browse to our folder where we're going to save our cache out. TyCache. And we'll leave it as tycache.tyc. Save, and yeah, everything's good. So we'll generate TyCache files. Okay, TyCache export complete. Good. Okay. Real quick, sorry, we'll open this back up and we'll disable this. So we'll get rid of we'll turn these guys off, and then we have a TyCache object, and then we will display. That's fine. We can keep this hidden, and then what we can do is under TyMesher, we'll pick our TyCache object. There we go. So now it doesn't have to, it still has to buffer every frame. Well, it has to build it once. I'd say it's a little faster, for sure. But you can tell what's happening here. So with our TyMesher settings, if you want the grain look, you can achieve that by just reducing your voxel size, the voxel radius. But if you want more of a blobby look, you can increase this. Something like 1. So you can get like a little bit more of a blob look. Where the voxels effectively turn into metal balls and give you this sort of like blob-like look to it. So it just kind of just completely depends on what you prefer. But yeah, that's basically it. And then after this, it's basically setting up to get this look. Basically, just set up a light, a camera, and backdrop. Really, just a quick tip, simple backdrop that I typically use. In Max, I just do plain. Toss an editable poly modifier on there, edit poly. And then grab the one of the edges there, and then hold shift, drag up in Z direction, and it creates a little wall on your floor there. You grab this edge, and then you do a chamfer modifier. You could do the chamfer modifier here, and then do an click on animate here, and do a chamfer modifier, so you can edit the chamfer. But if you have Max 2018, you can just use the actual chamfer modifier, and then you can drag it up like that, and maybe put like 20 segments on it. Boom, there you go. And so that is a really good backdrop. And then typically what I do is, depending on what rendering engine you're using, in this case I was using FStorm. Under FStorm settings, in the kernel settings, you can choose process alpha. And then in your materials for your background, let's just say a background. It doesn't matter. And then we can click on matte. So it's going to be a matte finish there. Apply that to our surface. And then if we drag out a camera here, let's do the whole shebang. We'll go through it all here. So we'll go to put a camera in there, and let me drag this up a little bit here. I don't want this video to be too long, but I never really set up a camera. I really never do this on my tutorials, so yeah, something like that'll be cool. Maybe a little closer in there. Something like that. If you want the cube to be centered up in the frame there, kind of like how I had it here. So yeah, that'd be cool. And then basically you just create a material for your mesh, and then go ahead and apply it. And all I did for this is just change the color and add some reflection and a little bit of increase the glossiness a little bit. And then from here, lights, F-Storm, make it a disk, toss that bad boy in there, maybe like rotate it like that a little bit. And I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with setting up lights and stuff, and everyone has their own special ways of doing it. But yeah, that's basically it. And then if you guys do use FStorm or V-Ray or Corona, or there's 100 other Octane or whatever else you want to use, you can choose an environment background. And typically I use an HDRI map. So basically I just choose an HDRI that I have. Actually, I'll give you guys a good reference here. There's a pretty cool link if I can find it. Yep, HDRI Heaven. So if you guys don't know, this is a great resource to pull some really really nice HDRIs from, and they're free. You can also donate to the creators. They have a Patreon page, which is pretty cool. So if you guys do use these a lot, then please support the guy that takes these insanely cool HDRI images. Um, so yeah, HDRI Haven, HDRI Haven, like the some kind of Viking, I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So texture map is just the HDRI. I've usually set that to 2. So we're good on materials and everything. And for the hand, it's just like a glossy white material. We'll select our light and kind of give it, maybe 8's good. And then we'll fire up the interactive render. In the kernel settings, I typically set light samples to something like 12, a little bit higher, max depth to 24, and I keep everything else default besides noise threshold. I set that to 0.001. That's basically it. And then let's hit real time here. Let's see if this actually processes. There you go. See, now we have our background completely transparent. So if we were to save this out as a PNG sequence, our background would be invisible, which is pretty cool. So then you can do whatever you want. But if you actually did want to see the background, you can uncheck matte and then make this whatever color you want. Yay. Blue. Neat. Yeah, so that's it for this tutorial. If you guys have any questions or um, any suggestions for furthering this squishy hand exercise here, or any suggestions for future tutorials, please leave them in the comments section. And if you did like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more tutorials. I'm planning on making a few more. I got a few on the list. Yeah, again, if you guys have any suggestions of stuff you wanna learn, I know a lot of this stuff has been pretty simple, little exercises here and there, but I'm still learning as well. I'm still learning TyFlow because it's currently being developed, and every um, it seems like every week there's a new update, there's new tools being added. So I'm going to continue learning them and creating tutorials and creating new pieces of art and sharing my process. So if you guys like what you see, please subscribe and we'll keep the conversation rolling. Um, I might toss this project up on Modulator real quick. I might toss this project up on Modulator. If you go to beta.modulator.com, I have a few other projects up in here. I have the procedural playing cards. I have the ASMR foam soap cutting. I have the pizza bubbles that I just posted, and a bunch of other stuff. So if you guys want to know how I created some of this other stuff, this is the recent video I just posted. You guys can come here and download the project files and see if I won't log it. But you guys can download project files. You can check out some of these other cool projects that are happening up on Modulator. Some of them are pretty wild. This one's using Mandelbulb 3D, which is a really strange software. But you can check out these projects, download the files, and then you can create a new branch to these projects. So basically, if you sign up, if you download some project files and you manipulate them or try something else or come across a new method of doing something and you make something really sweet, you can post it as a new branch to the particular project, right? So let's say for this project, I really liked what was happening in this branch here. Right? I could click on the branch button, and then I can post some images. I can post my files if I want to share them, and if I want to let other people download those and then create new branches. So it's a really cool way to learn from each other. You could download each other's files and make some cool stuff and start like a daisy chain of interesting artistic ideas. I don't know. So that's my plug for Modulator. um, so back to this. Yeah, so that's basically the end of the tutorial. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.